not to like toot my own horn, but like the way that I untangled those pieces, do not try that at home. That was extremely difficult to untangle. Okay, now I'm in a tough spot. There are 3 people on 8, so I don't have the best tiebreaker ever. Do I get aggressive and go for broke? Yeah, fudge it. Let's go for it. I'm gonna try to win the event right here, you guys. I'm gonna try to win this game so that I get white in round 11. Let's see. Oh no, he knows the line. Uh-oh. Play this one. Play this. Yeah. Let's see what he does. Your chess understanding is mind-blowing. Thank you, appreciate it. Could have played g6 too. Yeah, never seen number 2, number 3 before. Oh, they're strong players. He's thinking for a long time, so he's using his time too. Finding computer moves most humans would miss. Exactly, yeah. Let's see what he does. Is he disconnected? I swear Hikaru gets every single opening decision he makes. Indeed, I regret everything in life, you guys. What's going on? Why is he so slow? Okay, so I can play d5, I can play d6. I can also play like queen a5 or something. I mean, I'm a little confused as to what exactly is going on, so I'm gonna play queen a5 here and just ask him what he's doing. I'm kind of confused. Takes time to look up the moves. Maybe, you never know, but I doubt it. Plays e4. What the heck? I mean, oh, he just wants to play an equal endgame, really? I'm a little surprised by that. Let's go here. I mean, this is very, I mean, maybe he's happy with a draw here. I'm a little again, I'm very confused by whatever is happening. Although I don't like the way I'm playing this, to be honest. Yeah, what am I doing? Why am I playing like this? Shoot. Let's go here. Okay, I gotta shake it off. What am I doing, actually? What am I doing here? I've got to move. I'm actually playing this game very poorly. Okay, just that. Wait, what am I doing? I'm actually just like, am I actually just throwing this game? The heck am I doing, actually? Oh, geez. 6. Up 7. Heck. Oh, maybe I have e. Okay, I've got to go e6. It took me forever to spot this move. I'm getting too tired, actually. I'm getting tired. Go here. Yeah, I'm getting really tired, and I'm just starting to miss stuff. It took me forever to spot e6. Why did it take me so long? Now I'm down on time as well, which is bad. I mean, I should still be okay, but here. I'm gonna play b5 to stop c4, and I still have knight f4 somewhere. There, he wants knight g5. I'll go h6 to stop knight g5. Okay, plays h4. Doesn't really concern me. I'm gonna go a5, maybe b4. I'm actually gonna stop talking. I have to really focus because this is not a good position. It's gonna require a lot of technique to not lose this game. Maybe I'm probably okay here, but I need to focus. Before the idea, I don't understand. of h5. Position should be okay here now, actually. Just gotta make moves. Go here, knight f5, I guess. Shoot. Okay, I should be safe now. Yeah, now I should be safe. Okay. Now I reroute my bishop, and I should. Still nothing. Finally a blunder. Finally a blunder. I'm gonna win the game. I mean, it's 2 pawns. If this isn't winning, I don't know what is. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Now I just eat. There we go. There we go. We got the win. Big game. Thanks for 20 mates for the tier 1. Thank you, Sergio Rodriguez. That required that was a super GM game. Not to like toot my own horn, but like the way that I untangled those pieces, do not try that at home. That was extremely difficult to untangle. Like the way that I put the rook on h7 because my knight is glued to f8, the way that I untangled everything, that was super GM technique. Today I'm going to be going over a game that I played in the late title Tuesday yesterday against a very talented Azerbaijani junior, Aydin Suleymanli, who is 17 years old and has a rating of 2541. Now to set the stage, this game that was played was in round 10. I was on 8 points out of 9. There were a bunch of us on the same score group, so playing with the black pieces, I really felt like this was a must-win game. So without further ado, let's jump right into the action. Game starts with d4. Now I play the move f5. Again, as I said, I felt like this was a must-win game because if I drew the game, there would be a bunch of people who could potentially get to 9 points, or even if they drew, it would be very murky because of tiebreak. So d4 f5 is played, knight c3. Now I play knight f6, bishop g5, and here I play the move c6. Now the reason I played c6 is twofold. First of all, in a lot of Dutch variations, you want to support the center by putting the pawns from b7 to d5, so c6 supports the pawn push. Additionally, I have ideas like either queen b6 hitting the pawn on b2 or queen a5 putting pressure on the diagonal from a5 to e1. So my young opponent plays queen d2. Now I play queen to a5 here, and he plays the surprising move e4. Now again, in a blitz game, we're not going to be too critical about the various ideas or the specific moves, but it would have been more prudent to play a move like e3 followed by bishop d3 and knight f3, or potentially knight ge2. It's also worth noting that if white accidentally castles the king to the queen side, which looks very natural, after this move b5, white is in a lot of trouble suddenly, because the idea is b4 to attack the knight and then win the pawn on a2. So say white plays a move like, let's just say knight to f3, for example, I can go b4 here, and after knight to b1, I play knight to e4, let's just say queen e1, and now after queen takes a2, black is much better, if not already winning. So white has to be a little bit careful, and my opponent plays e4, I take, he takes back, I have to trade the queens. If I take on e4 after queen takes a5, I will lose the game. So we trade the queens on d2, I play d6 here, he goes bishop d3. So we have a queenless middle game very early, but in this position, white's probably a little bit better due to the pawn structure. Now there are a couple things going on. First of all, white can build a nice chain here from b2 to d4. Secondly, I have this backwards pawn at e5 that is a little bit weak. If I could go e5 here, for example, and let's just say we get some position like this, black is completely fine because I'm getting rid of the weak pawn, and now I have a very strong pawn chain from b7 to d5. However, if I try to play this move e5 after pawn takes knight f3, knight d7, let's just say white castles here, bishop d6, rook e1, white is much better because this is a very weak pawn. White has ideas like knight c4 to put pressure on the pawn on e5 as well, and black is in a lot of trouble here. So I have this backwards e pawn, which is a big issue. So I play this move g6 here. Now again, in retrospect, what I should have done is I should have probably put the bishop here on e6, and then after knight f3 played bishop f7, knight bd7, and castle. So for example, say we get some position like this, white is still better here, but black should be relatively okay. Instead, I play this move g6 thinking that I have time to play bishop g7 and castles. Now white castles along here, I play bishop g7, and now my young opponent plays rook e1, a very good move here because it puts pressure on the pawn on e7. So now I can no longer castle because I would hang the pawn on e7. Additionally, if I play like king f7 here, white can just start developing and potentially even double up the rooks on the e file, and it's very unpleasant to play. However, in a blitz game, even though I wasn't sure what I was doing, I had to keep making moves relatively quickly, because if you get too far behind on the clock and you're much worse in the position, you're going to lose the game. So I play knight bd7, now I get knight gf3, and now I played the very strange move knight f8, which is based completely on a miscalculation. My opponent plays rook e2, a very simple move to double up the rooks on the e file, and now after a very long think, I played this move e6. Now my initial idea was to play knight e6, but I simply forgot that after rook e1, if I go king f7 here, white has the very nasty move bishop to c4, because let's say white plays a move like bishop e3, rook e8, c3. In this position, I can go knight d5, I have knight f4, I can maybe move the knight back and develop the bishop on this diagonal, and black should be fine. But as I realized during the game, after this move knight to e6, rook e1, king f7, white has this very annoying move bishop c4, and now I have to play this move d5, and after bishop d3, white's doing really well. There's still a lot of pressure towards his pawn on e7. Additionally, white now has this great square on e5 for the knight, and it's highly unpleasant. So in the game, after a long thing, I play this move e6. Now this is not a good move. Again, in a classical game, I think I probably would have lost this, but in a blitz game, you keep trying to find moves, keep the game going, and maybe your opponent won't find the most concrete idea. So here rook e1 is played. Now this is a very normal move, nothing wrong with it, but white probably should have already played this move c4, and the reason this is so strong is because at some point white's going to be able to go c5, and I'm gonna have a lot of problems on this dark square on e5. If I push, he gets an outpost. If I play something like knight d5, there's a move like knight c4, and after takes knight e5, even this looks very unpleasant for black, so it's really hard to play. Fortunately, my young opponent plays rook e1, very logical human move. I go king to d7, pawn to c3. Now I play knight to d5, and he plays knight e4. Again, c4 here would have been very strong with the idea of c5, removing this pawn from d6, which covers the e5 square. Knight e4 is played. I go b5 here. Now again, white is obviously much better, but the reason for this, I stopped c4, and by stopping c4, now my knight on d5 is very well placed here. We get bishop d2. Now I play h6, reasonable move. The idea of quite simply is just to stop knight g5. Say I play a5, knight g5. This pawn on e6 is very weak. I can still kind of defend with knight c7, but it's really unpleasant. So I play h6. Now we get h4, which I don't know if this is necessary. The simple idea is to stop the pawn push. Now I go a5, g4 is played, and now I go a4, and already my opponent has started to misplay this. Now the reason that this is not so great for white anymore is that now this knight is permanently glued to d5. If white had gone b3 followed by c4 again, it's very tricky and very hard to play. I think after bishop a6, black still has some chances, but eventually white probably will be able to play c4. But after g4 a4, now it's not so easy for white, because if you do play b3 here, I can simply trade and probably play rook a1 and trade at the very least, if not in fact play something like bishop a6, where now when you go c4 after takes knight b6, suddenly there are problems on this diagonal from a6 to e2. So we get this move g5 played relatively quickly, which makes some sense. But after h5, the problem again for white is that there really isn't a way to break through on the king side. This knight on f8 looks really awkward, but it does guard this pawn. So even if white goes knight g3, there isn't a threat because the knight on f8 holds both of the pawns on g6 and e6. So he plays a3 here, which I will say is a huge fundamental mistake, because now white will never be able to put a pawn on c4 where it will be attacking the knight and I can't capture back. Say I go knight h7 just to illustrate the point. After takes and bishop a6, for example, here, just disregard the evaluation for a second because that doesn't matter. The thing is that in this position, the knight is always going to be very stable with an outpost on d5. So after a3, I play king c7. Simple move to develop the bishop, bring the rook into the game. Now my opponent plays knight g3, and here I find a fantastic defensive concept that really is difficult to understand unless you look at the piece placement and try to figure out how you can rearrange. So the big problem for black here is quite simple. Obviously I have a weak pawn on e6, which is always under pressure, but the main problem here is that I have these pieces that are stuck on the back rank. I can quite easily develop on the queen side, get this bishop to d7 and rook to e8, but again, that doesn't really solve this problem that I have with these three pieces here. So in this position, I find this idea of playing rook h7. Now the point behind playing rook h7 is that I want to develop the bishop to underdevelop the bishop to h8 so I can bring the rook to f7, because again, this knight on f8 is very passive, but here I need this rook to be active, and if I can't move the knight because of the pawn, then how can I activate the pieces? The bishop on g7 isn't really doing a whole lot here. It's targeting d4, but the pawn is obviously very well guarded. So by playing rook h7, knight g1 is played. Now by going bishop h8, I try to reset with the rook on f7 instead of h8. So f4 is played. Now I go rook f7, rook f1, and now I play bishop d7, finishing the development on the queen side as well. Rook f2, knight e7 is played here. Again, I could always go bishop g7, but it doesn't really do much. I can't reroute the other way, and the bishop is always keeping an eye on the pawn, so I go knight e7 here. Now we get knight e2, and now I play this great move, knight to f5. Now what knight f5 does is it basically renders this bishop on d3 useless, because now there are no threats on this diagonal, and if white trades on f5 after pawn takes, the bishop is just staring at a bunch of pawns. And when you combine that with the pawn structure on the queen side being fixed here, now I can slowly bring this knight back into the game eventually. So we get rook h2. Now I play bishop e8. The idea behind bishop e8, quite simple. I want to put the knight on d7 and then b6. The rook on e8 is completely fine. I don't really need it in the center yet, but longer term I can eventually maneuver it there. So now we get rook e1, knight d7, takes, knight g3, and now after knight b6, black is already very slightly better, specifically because of the locked pawn structure on the queen side. I will eventually be able to grip on the light squares, and white doesn't really have anything going on the king side. So we get rook e6 played here. Now I go rook f8, rook e2, and now I play knight d5. Now it's worth noting that here I should have played rook g7, but during the game I think I was a little bit worried about ideas like bishop f5 and maybe some kind of sacrifice, and then something like, I don't know, like g6 here maybe, or even something like just knight g3 followed by f5, f6, and g6, and it feels kind of scary, and I was already a little bit low on time, so you don't want to spend too much time. So I play rook f8. This way I guard the pawn, but I also keep an eye on the pawn on f5. So we get rook he2, knight d5, and now my opponent misses his final opportunity to potentially claim an advantage. He plays this move, rook e1. Now the best move for white here would have been to play c4. Now again, I'm not really going to critique here because it's not an easy move to play since it hangs the pawn on d4, but after takes, bishop d5 and bishop b4, white is maybe very slightly better here. However, my opponent plays rook e1, and now I'm able to go bishop f7, rook e2, and rook a e8. And the point is now I'm going to be able to trade off one set of rooks. Obviously I don't want to trade off both sets just yet, but I'm able to trade off a set of rooks, and I have all the trump cards here because I control the light squares on the queen side. So we get bishop b1, I trade, I go king d7, bishop d3, now I go knight e7. I probably could have gone knight b6 or bishop e6, but I do this for a few reasons. First of all, I want to prevent the sacrifice on f5, but also I want to open up this diagonal to make sure white can never push c4. King d1 is played, I go rook g8. We got a bunch of maneuvering moves here. I won't really go through them too much in depth. Now finally I play knight c8, king f3. There is one other trick to note here, by the way, though. I have to be a little bit careful besides just a sack here. There isn't some d5 push. Now in this position I can just take, but if for example my bishop was, let's just say, on e8, after d5 there's a problem with the pawn structure here. So that's what I'm doing. So I go bishop e6, knight c8. So now I guard the pawn. I also stop the c4 and d5 pawn breaks, and I want to bring my knight to c4 or even d5. King f3 is played, knight b6, king f2, bishop e7, bishop b1. Bunch of maneuvering moves again. I'll just go through them really quickly because there's no need to explain them. So we finally get to this position here, and now I choose to play this move c5. Now eventually I have to break, because again, when you look at this conceptually, I have a great knight that's targeting the pawns, but the bishop guards b2. There's nothing happening on the king side, nothing really happening on this open e file. So the only pawn break I have here is c5. For example, if I go d5, it doesn't do anything. It just blocks the position even further. So this is the only pawn break that I have. So now my opponent takes on c5. I play bishop takes. Worth noting that pawn takes is also possible, but I assume that here, by taking with the bishop, there is long-term going to be another pawn break with d4 as well, and so it just makes more sense. King f1, king c6, rook e7. Now here I play rook f7. I didn't want to do this during the game, I remember, but at the end of the day we were both down to about 10 seconds, so I have to keep the moves fairly simple. So we trade, king e2, bunch of maneuvering moves once again, and now I go bishop c4. And the idea is quite simple here. I have a great dark square bishop. You see all of white's pawns are on dark squares, whereas my pawns are on light squares. So if we exchange the bishops here, for example, his pawns can all be targeted by my bishop long term, while his bishop cannot target any of my pawns, and it's extremely passive being stuck on c1. So after bishop c4, my opponent makes a fatal blunder, and he plays this move bishop e3. It's worth noting already here, the computer thinks this is close to loss for white, quite simply because after you play a move like, let's just say knight f1, I can trade and go bishop f2 to win the pawn on h4. And if he trades right away after knight c4, again, you can't really come to the queen side because I have bishop f2. And if you play a move like knight f1 here, I can bring the king forward, knight g3. Now I go king d5, knight to f1, and now I have the very unusual move knight to a5. And if white tries king d3, again you run into bishop f2. And after a move like knight g3, now I can infiltrate with king c4. And after knight f1, I go king b3. Let's just say king d1. And now after knight c4, I'm going to win b2 or knight d2. We trade. I go bishop f2, and once again I win the game. So it's already pretty much lost here. But it's worth noting again that when you're in endgames, let's just say there are two bishops on the board, you're always looking to see which bishops do you want to exchange. Do you want to exchange the light squares or the dark squares? And in this case, because the pawns are on opposing colors, by exchanging the light square bishops, I will be able to win this game, simply because the dark square bishop is much stronger for me. So my opponent does blunder with bishop e3. We trade. Now I take on e3, and now I have knight c4 check with the fork, winning the pawn on b2. King d4, I take. Knight f1 is played. I go knight c4, knight e3, win a second pawn here. And after king d5, I just go knight b1. Simple idea, attack the pawn, but also free the path for the a pawn to go up the board. King d4, a3, knight c2 is played, a2 of course, knight a1, and now I go knight to d2, king d5, and I very simply play knight f3, going for this pawn. Again, the knight is stuck, preventing the a pawn from queening, and now I'll win this one, and I'll have an h pawn going up the board. So with the pawn, with the wide peepos on the a file and the h file, white can't really stop them both. My opponent plays c4, and after pawn takes pawn, he resigns because of course takes king b3. I can just go knight g2, takes h4, and unfortunately the knight is way too slow. Knight c2, h3, knight d4, h2, h1, and the game would end. So what do we learn from this game? A couple of things. First of all, when you reach a middleless queen, when you reach a middle game which is queenless, no queens on the board, if you have a big advantage like positionally where you've got a lot of space, You also have a lot of pressure. You want to try to do something as fast as possible, because if you let your opponent stabilize the position long term, they'll probably be able to unwind it. Now, it's not to say that I should have won this game, but when my opponent was not super aggressive early on and he let me stabilize with this b5 and a4, I was eventually able to unwind it and win the game. And that also, I will add, is one big difference between classical chess, even rapid chess for that matter, and blitz/bullet, where if you get a much better position but there's no clear-cut plan, you can't find the plan right away, if your opponent's able to survive for say 5-10 moves, somehow the tide starts to turn. So this was round number 10 from Title Tuesday yesterday. So again, trying to mix it up a little bit, do some new recap style things for you guys here on YouTube. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. You will also of course see Title Tuesday, which I did end up winning after this victory. So I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I will see all of you guys very, very soon.